Our next guest, Anne, here in the studio, has caused outrage this week after she said that as the head of a leading abortion charity, she didn't see any problem with a woman choosing to terminate the pregnancy because she wasn't happy about the gender of the unborn baby.
And Anne Furedi says she stands by those comments, and she's here alongside journalist Sonia Poulton, who says she's appalled by that attitude and thinks it's abhorrent and immoral to abort a baby just because it's the wrong sex. Good morning to you both. And can I firstly ask you why? This came from an article that you'd written online. So why did you decide to come out and say these things in the first place?
Well, let's be clear about what I said. And I didn't say that any kind of an abortion is a good abortion or a bad abortion. What I said was that if a doctor believes that it's the best thing for a woman's health, then that abortion can be legal if part of that reason is the fact that the woman is so distressed that she's going to have a girl or she's going to have a boy. It's all about whether it's the best thing for the woman, and that's a doctor's decision.
Can I ask you, under what circumstances, just explain my naivety in this, why a woman would be horrendously distressed about the sex of her child?
Well, what you have to understand is that when a woman comes and she has an unwanted pregnancy, she'll be having a discussion with the doctor about the circumstances that she's in. And typically, the way that the conversation will start out is a woman saying, I really can't cope with this pregnancy. And then the doctor will talk to her about maybe why she can't cope with it. Now, you imagine a woman who maybe comes and says, I can't cope with this pregnancy because I know that it's going to be a girl, or I know it's going to be a boy, and if I have this child, my husband won't stand it, I'll be thrown out of home.
Why? Because it's a boy or girl?
Is this religious and cultural reasons?
There may be cultural reasons, there can be all kinds of difficulties, and the only point that I'm making is that when people say that the sex of the fetus should never, ever be part of the reason why an abortion is requested, or indeed why a doctor would agree it, they really do have to understand those circumstances. No woman ever comes into a clinic and says, do you know what, I think I'd rather have a girl than a boy, so I don't want to have this baby.
Maybe that isn't what's coming across, isn't it? That that lots of people, even if they wouldn't have a termination themselves, will say, I can understand a woman saying, you know, this is not right for me, I'm not with the father, it was an unexpected pregnancy. But I think people were shocked that somebody would say, it's a boy, I don't fancy a boy, having a boy baby.
Designer baby.
Then it's designer baby.
And it doesn't
just before we bring Sonia in on this one, I just want to say, if you're watching at home today, Anne believes you fall into three camps, which is either you're pro-choice, you're very anti this, or you're somewhere in the middle. What would you like to add to those classifications?
Well, what I'd say is that, for me, I would describe myself as being pro-choice. That doesn't mean I'm pro-abortion. What it means is that I think that the person who should decide on the abortion is the woman who's facing that problem pregnancy, because I think she's the person who lives with the decision. So that's, for me, what it means to be pro-choice.
Are you pro-choice, Sonia?
I am pro-choice, and I've read your article, and so I think that while we're both absolutely pro-choice, I think we're pro-choice in slightly different ways. I'm pro-choice in terms of you're either going to go through with this pregnancy or you're not. But the way I interpret it, and obviously tell me if I'm wrong, the way I interpret it is you're pro-choice, but with sort of additional extras. So, for example, that, I mean, do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not pro-choice, but if it's a boy, I'll keep it. It's either you're going to have a termination or you're not.
But, you know, the way I look at it is that it's just that in women's lives, right, there are lots and lots of things that mean that they will decide that they can either have a baby or they can't. And, you know, they always take those factors into consideration, because it's not just like an abstract thing or just a decision that they take in principle. And so my point is that it's down to the woman to really make the decision about what's right and wrong for her. And you can have an opinion, I can have an opinion on it, but we don't live with it.
And is it actually anybody's business if somebody's come to that decision?
Part of my worry about this, because I tend to think that you've got a sort of abortion on demand attitude. Would that be a fair thing to say?
No, I think that, you know, no woman says that they want to, you know, have an abortion because they just want to have an abortion. I'm saying that women have unwanted pregnancies, and I think that they should be able to decide how they resolve that problem
the reason,
for them.
I understand
and it's
that.
a moral issue for them.
Exactly.
So what's your issue? Is it the fact when it's
I have
gender?
a number of issues. No, not just gender, because I do think we will go down the road of sort of eugenics, of, as you say, designer babies, if we start to cherry pick whether we're going to keep a baby based on this virtue or that virtue. That sort of thing really alarms me greatly. But my biggest worry about it is, and as I say, I am pro-choice, my biggest worry is that it's all become too clinical. And I believe that an abortion, to a certain degree, is an emotional setback. To a certain degree, it greatly affects the people involved, and that's not just the woman, it affects all different people involved. I ultimately believe it is the woman's say, but it affects all people involved. And I've interviewed people, a particular woman comes to mind, and she's really got a very distressing case, and she had a termination over 30 years ago, and she's never had children since. She doesn't even know if she can, but she is tortured, absolutely tortured by that. She imagines that child as it's fully grown, all of these things, and it is very, very torturous. And so I think what we need to do is not make it quite so clinical, and it needs to be more of a sort of, we look at the whole picture.
There will also, Sonia, on the other side of that coin, there'll be women who aren't tortured, who were tortured having to make the decision.
It is torturous.
And as Anne says, very few of those women make that decision easily, and it was torturous for them. But once they've made the decision and they've had the termination, that they don't go on for the rest of their lives being tortured because they feel they made the right decision.
But I believe, in my experience, only my experience, that's what we were going to talk about, in my experience, the people I've interviewed all have some sense of, even though I did what was right for me at that moment in time, I could have done with more help and support and more guidance. And my other worry about, if we start to go down the road of sex selection, is that it's not always the woman's choice. Sometimes that is pressure that she may get from her community.
Yes, and I take that point very strongly. And we mentioned before, cultural and religious differences. If somebody came to your clinic and said, because of religious beliefs, maybe for their family, they've been feeling pressured not to have a boy or not to have a girl, then what would you advise?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, let me say that I'm not trivialising at all or saying it's an easy decision for women or that it's just clinical, because it really isn't. These really are decisions that women weigh up very, very carefully. I think all of them. We see about 60,000 women a year who have abortions through BPAS, and when somebody comes to us, they will have a discussion with a doctor and a counsellor about the reasons why they want to end the pregnancy, and a big part of that is seeing the woman on her own to make sure that it really is what she wants.
But if she then told that doctor or that counsellor, the reason I don't want this baby is because it's a girl and my family don't want me to have a girl because our religious beliefs believe that we need a boy at this point.
Yes.
Then surely, would you advise her then, well, look, there are other options for you?
What does the law say? What's the law say on it?
Well, look, let me answer the two questions, right? The first question is, what would we say about that? The first thing that you would say is, well, do you want to stay in this relationship? Do you want to remain in this situation? Because we can refer women on to social services. There are times when, if a woman's being threatened, we can be involved in helping her get out, calling the police. There are we will work with women on that. But if a woman is basically saying, I want to be in this family, I need to be in this family, I've got children existing in this family, I just can't cope with this pregnancy, then that's when you're discussing with her about whether or not she wants to have the abortion. And that's when the law says that the doctor is making a decision about whether it's better for that woman's mental health. And the doctor's making the decision about whether or not it's better for that woman to do what she's asking and go ahead and have the abortion, or whether it's better to say, you know what, you can't have the abortion, back to that
Sonia,
family.
10 seconds to finish.
All right, but that's abortion as a big picture, but obviously we cannot, I don't believe we can cherry pick. I would never ever agree to a woman going full term that she doesn't want to, but I think we have to look at attitudes. We live in a highly sexualised society. We need to be sending out a message. Precaution, take precaution first. Don't use abortion as a precaution.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Indeed. Thank you.